Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Coffee, Buses and Politics. Martin is still away, so I'm joined by Stephen and Alex. How are you both?
Good morning. You
Thank
changed the
you.
music in the intro. It's the different song to start our
Is it?
7:30
Oh,
a.m.
I didn't know. It's just whatever's automatic.
All right, it did sound different. I am quite tired this morning. I have quite a long day after this coffee buses and politics with lots of meetings at work. And unlike other weeks when I start around 9, actually I have quite a rare 8:30 a.m. meeting today. How are you, Stephen?
I'm good. I've had a very, very long week of council meetings,
Mm.
including a big highways committee, which we'll talk about later. And I've got asset and procurement committee today, which I think ultimately we're talking about what's happening with New Shah Hall, but
Mm.
it's in part 2, so I can't talk about it.
And I currently have a trench running across the kitchen. You're relieved to know that we don't have a leak. We actually had two. Um, on the heating system. And so those have been being repaired for the past couple of days and should
Are,
be finishing today.
are you warm? At least the weather's starting to turn. So
Yeah, no, the no, mercifully, so we're okay. But that has been an almighty pain in the proverbial. Anyway, we've got a few things to talk about this week, but I just wanted to start with a correction. Ross Martin, who is a councillor on Huntingdonshire District Council, I believe he's the leader of the Conservative group.
yes, and a councillor for Sawtry, I think.
Yes, got in touch. So I'll just read out the message. Said hi, chatting a few things. I've been contacted saying you and Stephen Ferguson said my amendment would cost 24 million, which is nowhere near the truth. Our amendment would have saved 800k, and the parking and pitch traders fee would have reduced income by 2.7 million over 5 years, whilst saving 3.5 million. My amendment is attached. He did send that to me on Facebook. We chatted about it a bit. So
that's entirely on me. Yeah. So I think I said 2.20. Did I say 25 million or something? In fact, the real figure of the cost of parking, because I've dug the piece of paper out of my car this morning, was 2.6 million. So I got it wrong by an order of magnitude. Although in my defence, the reason why I got that wrong, as we mentioned last week, is that these proposals weren't given to me or anybody else. Well, they were given to us before the meeting. I think they came through at 1 o'clock on the day of the meeting. As you know, I've got a job, so I was at work, came home, went to an executive meeting when I was setting out targets for next year, and then went straight to the council meeting. So I genuinely had an open email attachment, which I don't think I should be expected to do on the day of the meeting. And then I was expected to stand up and debate these proposals that didn't even have a copy of them on the table when we got in, and so I hadn't seen them, and I was talking from memory. So he's right. The cost of reducing car or making an hour free car parking, on this bit of paper is 2.6 million pounds. But I hadn't read that before the debate. I had to stand up during the debate, walk to the front, and ask for a copy of it. So how am I supposed to defend budget proposals? In a 5-minute speech when I hadn't even read them? And so certainly they were defeated. So what he says here is that they've got two proposals. One was to introduce 1 hour free parking in the council short stay car parks, which will cost 2.6 million pounds over 5 years, and one was to increase market trader fees. Not increase market traders fees, which is save 45 grand. That's 2.7 million. Now, on the other bit of we're going to save 3.5 million things. Those so when we put together a budget, it has to go through scrutiny committees. It has to go through cabinet. Anything. So, for example, when we did the council tax support scheme, have to go through scrutiny, sometimes multiple scrutiny meetings, have to go through a cabinet meeting, have to go through the full council for big decisions, and instead, so they're basically suggesting that we're going to reduce our income by £2.7 million, and somehow we're going to find £3.5 million through cuts to our budget, And so when Ross presented this, he said, and this is from my portfolio, and not having seen this, so one of the proposals is that we were going to have a new licensing officer, which will cost about 92 grand over 5 years. And Ross stood up in his speech and said, we don't need a new licensing officer because we're doing really well with food inspections. But this is a licensing officer not for food safety inspections, but to inspect licensed premises, of which I think there's 800 in Huntingdonshire. 40% of all violent crime comes from misuse of alcohol, and as the statutory authority for licensing, it's important for us that we get out once in a while and inspect all the premises, and that's what that was for. So the officers who made that request originally, saying we haven't got enough resources, had to come to me. Had to justify to senior leadership team. I had to justify it. We went through a scrutiny process for our budget. We stood up and we presented our budget. And so we had all these opportunities for scrutiny. And so I'm expected to vote on these cuts to services, some of which were wrong, some of which I fundamentally agree with. I'd love to have had the chance to talk about the 1 hour free parking proposals. Most of the things they're suggesting are sensible. Some of them are wrong. But you can't debate those things in 5 minutes. For what there's 15 things on this list. How can I debate those things in 5 minutes when I hadn't even seen the bit of paper, and he hadn't even given me the courtesy to hand me the bit of paper when I walked into the meeting? So yes, I got those numbers wrong. It's because I hadn't seen the papers, and I certainly haven't looked at them since. Because what's the point? And I think I did him a favour, because I've got this principle that I'm not going to vote on things that I don't understand. And because I hadn't read his proposals, I had no opportunity to, I abstained on this vote, which I think is the best I could have done. And as you said last week, perhaps the best reaction would have been to vote against those proposals, because frankly, and I apologise for my mistake, but it's rude and it's disingenuous for democracy that we can't properly debate things, because it's obviously just a stunt. And I'll make this prediction now. The reason why they're doing these things, they didn't have many councillors turn up on the night anyway, so they had lots of absences. They could never have voted it through. They're doing it so they can put it on leaflets saying that council turned down the chance to 1 hour free parking. And I predict, and I'll come back after the next election and I'll say if I'm wrong, but I predict this will come all over leaflets. And it was never a serious proposal. It's just a stunt for election leaflets. And it makes me very, very angry. And I told Ross how angry I was. I'm still angry about it, because democracy doesn't work like this, does it? It doesn't work if we can't. I thought it would be an intellectual debate where we talked about things, came to conclusions, and just thrusting bits of paper into people's hands at any level of democracy doesn't really work. So apologise for making mistakes because I hadn't seen your papers, and if you brief me properly, I will always read your papers.
Cool.
So do you know, Stephen, so is the figure they arrived at over the next, was it 4 or 5 years, you said?
5 years for the medium
5 years.
term.
Is it based on, so presumably it's based on like the most recent use of the pay and display or charge car park?
I mean, all of these things.
I wonder how it's calculated.
All of these things are estimates, and our budget and their budget and anybody's budget, they're going to be estimates. We don't know how much car parking income is going to be. There's lots of but it's the best estimate, And to be fair to them, they had to put it in front of the Section 151 officer, who I believe got it the night before the meeting or day before the meeting, And she has to say that these are legitimate. So we can say that most of the assumptions are legitimate, but things like cutting a licensing officer was just, he didn't understand what's happening, and I think that's wrong. So anyway, let's move on.
All right. Well, in any case, on parking, I think obviously. We should say the actual figure, even if it's an estimate.
But behind the scenes, when we were setting this budget, there was lots of discussions and joint administration, not about cutting parking to free, about not putting parking costs up, because we haven't put parking costs up since I've been a councillor. So I'm going to say for about 7 years, the previous administration, maybe 6 years, did these big car parking increases, and we haven't done it because that is, for us, that's how we're supporting traders, by not increasing car parking charges. So there was a big discussion about, really, one of our core principles is we should put up charges like in line with inflation, so you don't get these big shocks when you have to put things up. You should put things up by 3%. People don't mind so much when you put things up by 20% because you haven't done it for 7 years, and that's a bigger shock. And so, I like all of the things on this list. All of the things he suggested are sensible. But you can't vote for things that you haven't had a chance to discuss and scrutinise properly, and that's because democracy doesn't work like that.
So happy to sort of set the record straight on that. I did say to Ross he'd be welcome to come on the show. Unfortunately, he starts work early on a Friday wouldn't be able to make it. But he said if he ever has a Friday off, he'll join us.
Hey, we can do.
Well,
the
we can
show.
always do another time
Yeah.
because I don't think I'm doing a 5 a.m. coffee bus in politics. Although I do relate having had jobs in the past starting at like 6 or 6:30 a.m. and I don't think you want the 5 a.m. coffee buses in politics.
No, I'd be interested to see how many people tune in for 5:30. So a couple of bus bits. Well, the sort of franchising process is starting from the combined authority. So that's going to take quite a long time to happen, but that will, that the process is starting. There's something that came out that I thought was interesting. The combined authority has put out actually quite a detailed bus route map for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which is actually really useful, I think. There's also some data that came out about how many people have been using the Tiger Bus Pass and so on. But I think what's most, all very good. I think one of the things that's most interesting is that they're emphasising that small bus operators will be encouraged into doing franchising and so on, which I think is welcome. As long as they meet all the requirements and so on, to have a more competitive marketplace, which I think is interesting to see. And I think it's one of the interesting things that will happen as a result of bus franchising.
Yeah, one of many interesting things that's going to happen. I think it's good.
Yeah. So that was the CPCA's Transport and Infrastructure Committee, which met on Wednesday. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. I mean, I don't want to get into stagecoach bashing, but they are the £600 gorilla in the room. I just think it's. I think more competition is good, and I think it's interesting and positive that the process is going to encourage small and medium-sized companies to provide bus services. I happen to be watching back one of last week's show. I pause and say and ah far too much. I didn't realise quite how annoying it is. So
it's because it's so early in the morning. I find I speak a little bit better if it's the evening, to be honest.
Well, maybe we should do this Friday evening, get it live streamed to all the pubs. But I am trying to work on that. Anyway, Stephen, did you want to talk about Little Paxton Bridge?
Yeah, man. So this is, I mean, it's probably not as interesting for everybody else in the county, but it's a big issue in St Neots. Is that Mill Lane in Little Paxton? Is the most important.
Not to be confused with Mill Lane in Cambridge, which is a completely different.
No, I think that's sorry. Let me get it right. It's Mill Road. I think it's Mill Road in Little Paxton, not Mill Lane. They're both called Mill. We call it Little Paxton Bridge anyway. Yeah, and up until 2020, yeah, the standing joke and sitting here was every time it rained, is Little Paxton Bridge shut because when the river goes above 1.2 meters, which is not massively above its normal level, that road floods and there's some big gates and they get shut. And that was an inconvenience. And I went through, in 2020, I went through the records and it was shut for about 3 days a year on average. Yeah. And it's inconvenient because it's, the paper said that there's a 20-minute detour. I reckon that when those gates shut, the whole of St Neots snarls up, the whole of Little Paxton snarls up, and it costs about 40 minutes, which is difficult. If you're a carer or a parent, or a firefighter, that's a massive increase in your journey time. And 3 days a week is inconvenience, but we can do with it. In 2020 at Christmas, it flooded. The river got to 1.5 meters, which is record level. And then 4 times since then, in the last 5 years, that's happened, including twice when the surface of the road has washed away. And so that's caused lots of consternation in St Neots. There was a petition with 3,000 signatures on it, brought to County Council by a chap called Mark Hawkins. Yeah, at the same meeting, the Conservatives proposed that we spend £250,000 on an options appraisal into basically understanding the problem there and potentially, look at the cost of building or improving that crossing so it doesn't flood. Yeah, that the county council, that was a Conservative amendment, which the Joint Administration amended and got it deferred to the Highways and Transportation Committee, because that's actually the right thing to do. It's the way that we should be discussing things is in committees, and so that came up. The original debate was in July last year. We've had to wait a long time, so this came up at the last Highways and Transportation meeting, and we debated the proposals. And look, £250,000 to write a report is a lot of money, and my estimate is it would cost maybe 10 or 12 million pounds to improve that crossing by maybe raising about 150 meters of road. Perhaps it might cost less, perhaps it might cost more, who knows. But this is the first stage in doing that. And as a local member, and having had 3,000 signatures on a petition, it seems like a lot of money, but in the grand schemes of things, it's not to solve a problem. There are other roads in Cambridgeshire which get shut. So Elder Causeway is one. There's one in Whittlesea, which Martin could have talked about. But this is a road that runs through the middle of Cambridgeshire's biggest town, biggest place in Cambridgeshire County after Cambridge. It goes straight through the middle of our town, given that Little Paxton and St Neots almost have they're different places, but they're very well connected. And so it causes massive consternation. And so I had lots of people from Little Paxton Parish Council turn up and do some fantastic speeches. We had Tim Wiley talk about the flooding situation on Mill Lane, who did a fantastic speech, and I passionately supported it. But what happened, of course, is that the committee is mainly people from the Joint Administration, all who voted against the proposals. I was the only one to vote in favour of it. And then the Conservatives, who'd brought the amendment in the first place, made this big fuss, as usual with Steve Count, criticising me all over social media for agreeing to defer it to this committee. Then I think there were 7 Conservatives there. 3 of them voted with me for it, which I'm very grateful for. And 4 of them abstained. And it's like, it's your proposal. You've brought it here. We've done all the work, and you couldn't even be bothered to support your own proposal. As a member of the Joint Administration, I feel completely disillusioned by everything. There's 2 big things I've tried to fight for, I think, as a county council. One was free bus transportation for the residents of Granston, Wesley, and Abbottsley, which was kicked out. So it doesn't, being in the Joint Administration doesn't buy you any favours, nor should it really. I get that, but you have both your big projects basically voted out without any support from your own side and no support from the other side. So maybe that's a legitimate thing to do. Maybe it's a lot of money. It is a lot of money, and we've got big financial pressures, but it's still disappointing nonetheless. The good news is, off the back of Tim Wiley's work, is that there was an alternative proposal. It wasn't an alternative. The money had already been allocated from a different budget, but to spend £100,000 basically looking at the flooding situation around there. So David is a bit of a historian and probably remember, but at the turn of the century, the Ouse used to flood, and they've changed places like Lammas Meadow in St Neots into a skating rink. And some of the infrastructure they use, there's a little sluice gate which are closed to flood Lammas Meadow. It still exists but doesn't work anymore. So Tim's got this idea that if we built up some of the banks around there, refurbished that gate, and could shut it when the flooding occurs, we could use Lammas Meadow as some sort of attenuation pond, which is kind of what it was designed for in the first place, and it would prevent the road from flooding, which I think is a really elegant and innovative and relatively cheap solution. So County Council did agree to spend £100,000, up to £100,000 on that, and also an appraisal study looking at Erith, Whittlesea, and Little Paxton, so maybe £50,000. But I still think it's less than we deserve. And it's just all these things are played out on social media with lots of people getting angry, but when it comes to it, that nobody wants to vote for it. And even the people who put the motion didn't want to vote for it. Just seems odd to me and disappointing.
Yeah, I have to say that that's very odd, given it was like a full council motion with the opposition support, and the non-committee for the vote to be split is really interesting. I presume it is because of due to the budget process as well, because being a large sum of money, maybe some of the arguments were it has to be done through the budget setting process rather than the committee. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I wonder as well, how I've just seen. I mean, in a related, not very related news, I've seen this. This was last month. I'm just going to put it in the comments as well. The additional investment from central government. I'm not sure what exactly our allocation is for the internal drainage board funding. So like I think we got some additional funding in our county based off on this national announcement. So yeah, I'm actually trying to find out like how much is that, and yeah, maybe that's another way to look at the issues of flooding through.
Well,
Do we have any additional investment at all or not?
Well, the IDBs, which basically mostly in the Fens, are basically community, largely agriculture-based schemes to deal with. If you're a farmer, you have to keep your land drained as well, and that's the way they do it. IDBs lots of them are on their last legs, and really,
Yeah.
really struggling. So completely welcome that. And it will help. But I think if you look at, I've been on the regional flood committee for the past 4 years, and if you look at the infrastructure, so to the whole of Finland basically is artificial because it's based on drainage schemes, and that infrastructure is all lots of it's Victorian, lots of it's at the end of its life, and there aren't any concrete plans to replace all of it, and so it's a huge problem. All we're doing is literally we're just about holding back the tide, and eventually lots of things are going to go wrong, and there's going to be huge consequences. And those consequences are perhaps Paxton Bridge, even at its worst, as inconvenience, but when you're living in the Fens and large areas of where you live are going to be permanently flooded, as happened earlier, I think in Lincolnshire that happened earlier this year, and they just couldn't deal with it, and so it's a constant threat. And
so the town I went to school in is a place called Bruton, which has which was known as the Dam. There's a huge earthen bank that was built after some particularly bad floods to protect the town. And I think it's had to be reinforced or enlarged because of the effects of climate change. Basically, there is more water more often coming both from the sky and along the river. I think this has got to be the worry with places like Little Paxton, and there'll be other, across the Fens as well. There'll be other places like it where there's a really good chance it's going to get worse. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm not an expert on very much, to be honest. But the other thing is more housing, which we need, will also affect that. Will affect water discharge patterns. So that's an issue. So the money is welcome, but whether it's enough or not, I don't know.
I don't think. I mean, I will have to see like what the allocation is for our area, but I think what Stephen was saying. I think like the historic like underinvestment in Environment Agency, in the drainage boards, and so on. Like, and it's happened under like successive governments. I'm not blaming a particular party for it. I think it got us to a situation where a lot of the work is reactive, when so many problems are to do with the infrastructure that will cost significant amounts of money. So unless you invest to fix some of the infrastructure, you can't just get rid of the issues just by improving the maintenance or clearing the drains, and especially with the housing. So that's the problem, is someone will at some point need to invest significant amounts of money in many areas in Cambridgeshire to fix the infrastructure. So
this also goes to another thing, which is I'm not sure that I question how much this should be done by central government, and I'm going to go back to my usual hobby horse, which is that we should have regional government that is doing this sort of thing. But there you go. Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know why it's called a lammas meadow?
No, I don't.
no.
Does it have to do with lambs and asses? I hope not.
No. Well, no, not really, but not a million miles away. You weren't allowed to graze your animals on there until after Lammas Day.
When is Lammas Day?
1st of August.
I better go and move my cows then.
One of the quarter days. Yeah.
Can I just say one more thing? So this all went down, yeah. And so I said, I've been a loyal member of the Joint Administration, fairly loyal. I probably voted against them more than any other member of the Joint Administration. But I've supported them on some difficult and contentious schemes because I feel they're right, yeah. But what really annoyed me afterwards is, so we had this meeting where my friends, some of my Lib Dem friends and some of my Labour friends voted against this. Fair enough, I accept that. But then, like, next day on social media was a picture of our MP, who I respect, Ian Sollum, and some of the Lib Dem councillors around here posing on Paxton Bridge and claiming that we'd somehow won £100,000 of funding. Like, actually, in that meeting, you voted, against £250,000 funding, to the town that you represent. Yeah, and that's not a reason to celebrate. £100,000 that they're claiming they won was in the agenda papers as to no. It wasn't like we were voting on it. It had already been decided. So, that kind of disingenuity where people are doing one thing and then trying to go on social media and claim credit as if they'd won something else, I think was completely disingenuous. And I want to say that Tim Wiley, who dragged me out of bed one night at 11:30 when the river was flooded to walk around those meadows in the rain, because he invented that scheme, deserves a huge amount of credit, as does Mark Hawkins, who brought the original 3,000 person petition to the council, and I guess the case to Conservative councillors who brought the motion in the first place, even though I didn't support it in the end. So lots of credit to be spread around, but I think, you know, we could have done better out of that.
Yeah. I mean, that it was discussed. I remember from when I lived in St Neots, when that bridge is shut, it fouls things up something wicked. It really does.
I mean, the traffic goes right back to the A1, because the part of the problem is, like, if you're driving off the A1, you don't know, there's no signage on the A1. Yeah, so you don't know that bridge is cut. And so basically, people on their route home, as I do several days a week, drive through Little Paxton on my way to St Neots and vice versa, and they'll get to the gate or close to the gate, and the gate will be shut, and you've got everybody trying to do the same thing, and so the whole of Little Paxton becomes it's very dangerous when it backs up onto the A1 as well. So it's a big problem, so Tim's suggestions will hopefully reduce the frequency and severity of happening, but they won't prevent it happening for completely. So, you know, it's a partial success, I guess.
And it is a permanent feature of St Neots Facebook groups. Is Paxton Bridge shut?
Oh yes. Yeah. There is a website. There's a website called Is Paxton Bridge Shut, where you can go and it tells you if the bridge is shut or not.
Really?
I think it's more frequent. I have to say, like, the posts about Paxton Bridge are more frequent than the traffic cone on Oliver Cromwell's statue in St. Ives. So there is other objects being placed on that one, but. Yeah, I mean, I think it is, like, you know, I think it's fair to call it like a partial success, and that something like will be done, and there's some positive news, but at the same time, it's not the long-term solution that is needed on this or, you know, other areas which are severely affected by flooding across the UK. So yeah, one of the things I'm looking into is what the government is doing, whether that should be managed regionally or locally or centrally in terms of the funding on those issues, because I think at the end of the day, lots of those projects will come down to how much money councils have to deliver infrastructure.
And I think this is something the government has talked about, but there's too many earmarked pots of money. And I get the earmarks are important, but there are times when it would make more sense. The other problem is when you get the earmarked pots of money, they can't always be used as innovatively as might be desired. I mean, there's also there's been a proposal going round, who knows if it'll happen, for a youth centre in Huntingdon, which would be great, but it's restricted to the ward, to North Ward, and finding a location in the ward is actually a bit difficult. Whereas if we could literally go the other side of a street, it would still serve the ward really quite well, but it isn't in the ward. And I get why things like that happen, but it's really frustrating. Talking of bridges and mills and roads, Alex, there's the and I'm not saying you've been doing this, just to be clear, she's absolutely been doing this. It's terrible. The cameras on Mill Road have been vandalised again. That's the one thing.
Doing it. I'm surprised, Alex. Really.
I mean, I've just seen this. I literally whilst we were speaking, I've seen it pop up on my phone, like as news, like from the Cambridge Independent. So that's why I shared it. Yes, I haven't read all the article, but it does say the Mill Road bridge cameras were targeted again. You know, in the past they have been sprayed with, you know, red paint or whatever it might be. Like, I'm not sure what was done this time, or they were covered. It's actually, like, you know, quite common. This happens in, you know, in London, like in the ULEZ zone as well, like cameras being vandalized or covered and so on the London congestion charge. Yeah, I mean, it's happening. The thing is, like, from my perspective, is like it will just cost the council more money because the scheme has been implemented, and they will just have to, you know, repair them or fix them again, spend the taxpayer money again, once again on them, and then they will be done again like this. And yeah, it will just go in a cycle of spending more money that could be better spent somewhere else, just cleaning up the cameras. So yeah, it's definitely not me doing it, but I have to say I was watching some videos yesterday from some of the groups who previously organized against the congestion charge, and there were like a couple of people being interviewed, like kind of like there was a few days ago like a demonstration like on the bridge when Paul Bristow actually visited as well. And most people like made sensible points, but there was one person, I'm not sure who they were, probably just someone interviewed like as they were walking past, basically saying like, yeah, this should, what happens in London with the ULEZ cameras should happen here and so on. And I thought there's not anyone related to, I don't think, the group or to a political party, but I thought that you shouldn't really encourage people to basically vandalize like things online. I think it can happen when you do those vox pops, and so people like have their say. Obviously, like I'm all for people expressing their views, but I think if you watch that, and you might be tempted, that's not really helpful to kind of promote people saying yes, we should vandalize cameras. And I think at the end of the day, look, like I see it this way, like I understand some people like are really against, right? I am very against some of the, especially previously, some of the Home Office policies. I'm not going out there in London at the Home Office and vandalize their building, right? Because I don't like their policies. There are other ways where I can express my frustrations with policies or politicians' decisions without damaging property. And that's something that we should not endorse or promote.
I agree. I mean, it's. I also have a slight. I might be being a little bit unfair here. You sometimes get people who are very law and order, except when it affects them, who complain about this, and I find that frustrating. And I'm thinking of particular people I'm related to, which is I find quite frustrating. The thing is I know this is way off Cambridgeshire. ULEZ has, or the reports I saw has already improved air quality in the ULEZ zone, and I think it was something like a 60% decrease in particulates and so on. Given that I've got a young nephew who lives in the zone, I'm very keen on that. So it has worked, or is working. But no, I agree. The taking things and doing them yourselves is not a good idea. I mean, we had one in Huntingdon where somebody objected to a kissing gate and thought it should be replaced with a different piece of infrastructure. And so they sent an email round, which I was copied in on, saying that they were going to, if it wasn't removed by such and such a date, they were going to just go and do it themselves. Now, I get the frustration with how slow local government can be. I genuinely do get that. But all that does is, firstly, this makes it really difficult to work with you if you're basically threatening criminal damage if you don't get what you want. But it also meant officer time was spent dealing with that, which could have been used on something else. In the end, it did get that piece of infrastructure to get replaced. And I have to think on the substantive point, I think it was the right thing to do to replace it. But
but as I say, even if you think like the whatever is implemented is not good, or it could be better, or should be scrapped altogether, like that's not how you get things done, right? Like the only thing that will happen is the council will spend more of your money, our council tax money, and like general council funds to fix the issues. Like the cameras will be working again, then there will be damage again, then like more money will be spent. It's the same as like blocking roadworks. What you do is you're like just increasing the officer and the team's time. They will have to come back again, or I don't know, when double yellows are painted and like there's one car that won't move, then the teams will just come back again tomorrow and the day after, therefore like every single time paying for more time until that parking restriction is done. So that's the only thing that happens in practice. And the only way that it can be reversed is again through the Highways Authority. Is not to I don't think it's through Paul Bristow's executive decision, right? Like, so if you wanted to reverse like a scheme like this, it will be again the county council currently, or the new unitaries that will appear after the local government reorganization will be the Highways Authority, right? So yes, I mean, if there was in the future, like schemes have been reversed in the past, that's the way, the channel that's been done, not by damaging property or by having promises that can't be delivered unless you have the Highways Authority backing.
Yeah. No, I do agree. Should we Stephen, did you want to talk about bar charts?
Yeah. So I think we want to cover the mayoral elections as fairly as possible, and I don't know if you guys have, but in the past on social media, I have been incredibly critical at Liberal Democrats for their use. I think their dishonest use of bar graphs. But then a chap called Gennaro, who is, a friend on Twitter, is that a thing? On X, as it's called now. Somebody who, he and I have disagreed a lot in the past, but I think he respects my integrity as a politician and has been, was very kind to me during general election campaign. Anyway, on Alan Smith's latest leaflet, there is a bar graph describing the outcome of the 2021 mayoral election results, which is when Nick Johnson was elected. I mean, I can remember that intimately because I was on the phone to my friend Nigel, who was feeding back information from that count as it happened, and was one of the most exciting things that's ever happened. But the bar chart shows that 2021, this is on Anna's leaflet, that in 2021, it's a 3-bar chart showing that Labour finishing first, Conservatives finished second, and Lib Dems finishing third. Yeah, that is the actual outcome of the election, is that Labour won that election. But if you're going to put that on the bar chart, what you're implying is that's the vote share. I mean, I think most people would understand that they're trying to demonstrate the vote share. And of course, that election wasn't held on first past the post, as this election is. And what actually happened in that election is that the Conservatives got the most votes, Labour got the second largest amount of votes, and Liberal Dems get third. Then, because it was like second preference, whatever it's called, people's second preference votes were added up, and Nick won because lots of Lib Dem voters don't like the Conservatives, and probably thought Nick was great as well, and Nick won through that method. But to put on a leaflet implying that kind of that Labour got the biggest vote share, I think is it's doing what the Lib Dems do, and I don't think it's particularly accurate. So, have you? I suspect you've got some of the leaflets in your house, David. If you don't,
no,
I don't have those, but I have my own bar charts. I will say one thing. I think because I do use like a general election result, just because it's me being a candidate again, and I'm just saying thank you everyone for supporting the general election. But I clearly mark it as this is the parliamentary result. I think you have to. Like, that's my view. Like, I'll always put the source, and I think it's fine
and
to say because the last
you were a candidate in that election, yes, that's fair enough.
Yeah,
I think that's fair enough. Boundaries different though,
Yeah.
is one issue. But I mean, I'm all for the use of data, yeah, if it's accurate and there's context to it, yeah.
Yeah, I think the context is the point there.
I don't think that's happened here, and the issue is it's just a race to the bottom. Is that I love stats and data and graphs, yeah. And so during the general election campaign, I really wanted to respond to the Lib Dem bar charts with bar charts of my own, but I didn't want to be perceived as doing the same bullshit tricks. And it just, every time I complain about this on social media, even though I'm not a Labour Party member, people come back, look, Labour are doing the same thing elsewhere. And it doesn't help anyone, man. It doesn't help politics if we don't honest, because actually biggest vote share in that election was the Conservatives, and we'll probably see that. Well, we'll see it again for sure because it's first past the post, unfortunately, this time. So I think it's important that people are accurate wherever. I'm a bit of a data nerd, I get it, but I think these bar charts, wherever they're used, are implying things which aren't necessarily true and need lots of context to explain them at least.
I have to say one thing just to give credit to the Lib Dems. So on the latest county leaflet in Huntingdonshire, the bar chart has a little asterisk saying excluding independent councillors, because like the bar chart doesn't show the independents, say that there are X many Lib Dems, X many Tories, 10 Labour, only Lib Dems can win the council, kind of thing. But now it says, Stephen, it does say, to be fair to them, the bar chart does not include independents. So you read the small print,
don't care. You don't do that. You don't. In any system, where you're trying to express data, you don't put a little asterisk and I've deliberately included these people because it doesn't. I mean, Tom Sanderson is the longest serving, I suspect, and most well-known person in Huntingdon politics, and to exclude his influence on, local politics over the last 20 years is ridiculous. And so people aren't going to read the asterisks. At best, they're going to glance at the bar charts, and I don't think. I mean, it might be a slight improvement, but it's still fundamentally dishonest, and I don't agree with it.
I have to say I agree with that. I'm just saying there's a difference, because I think, I'm not sure if someone complains like officially or not, but like compared to the last leaflet round I've seen around here and the current leaflet round I've seen in St. Ives, like just like a few days ago, it does say the St. Ives one says excluding the 6 independents with the same bar chart.
But they do it because it's a tried strategy and it works, doesn't it? They did really well in Cambridgeshire outside of Hunton, but in South Cambs and St. Neots, they did absolutely brilliantly. So it's a proven strategy that works, but that's still not a good enough reason to do it.
Yeah, but people won't read like the small print. I think the message is still only X party like can win here, so it's still the same thing. So like the method hasn't changed. You're right. So
I haven't got the leaflet in front of me, so I can't remember exactly what it says. So I'll have a look next time I see one. So I'm going to make 2 points. One is that the election results are reported as the total vote after transfers. So it's not completely out of bounds. It would have maybe it should have been a stacked bar graph showing transfers and so on. This is a problem with the electoral system we've got, where and there's 2 things on that. One is the effect of first past the post, which leads us to this style of campaigning, which is vote to keep out the person you don't like rather than vote for the person you like. And if we had an all proportional system, there would be places where you would get some very strange results, because suddenly it turns out everybody actually wants party X, but they've been voting to keep out party Y, and the way they thought you had to do that was party Z, based on past elections. The other thing is we have got, and this is one of the problems with politics, is we have got into, it's not exactly a race to the bottom. Everybody wants the biggest share of pie, but they don't care about how much smaller that makes the pie, so long as they've got the biggest share, because of you're winning election.
Yeah,
that's all the parties, and that is a problem. And I don't know how you get out of that, because whether PR will happen or not. Maybe it's me being wildly idealistic, but I'd love to see the parties get together and say, actually, this is how we should be doing campaigning. We should be how we should be doing political communications. Because the other one, you also get the newspaper alike things, that sort of thing, which I think are not great. And there's various stunts that people do with leaflets, like putting things that look like final reminders on bills and so on. And it's not tremendous. I think it cheapens politics generally. So
the local Lib Dems were complaining. Wasn't there? There was a Conservative leaflet sent out in a envelope saying final reminder on bill. Yeah. Which is a tactic to get you to open the envelope. But I'd agree with them. It's fundamentally dishonest. But then, Joe Harvey's one of my friends as co-admin on your brilliant Facebook group, and she came back and saying we don't do that. I criticised them for saying that it's fair enough, but Lib Dems don't have the best reputation when it comes to honesty on leaflets. It's the problem with leaflets and propaganda, man.
Part of the issue is that you have national parties, and you have I think part of it is parties are generally too big. Broad church fine, but we've ended up being too broad. Again, PR have more parties, I think would be better.
I'm going to clip you, David. I'm going to clip that. David Enkel saying the problem is we have national parties. I'm going to clip that and put it on my next leaflet. Well, I'm not really, but
No. I mean,
this is a good quote for the leaflet, Stephen. I think the issue is the new heating bill That is a national conservative leaflet. Yeah, that's the thing that you go on, whatever, as a conservative member on the website, you order 2,000 of them and you like leaflet them everywhere. It's the same attack on the obviously Labour's decision around means testing the winter fuel payment, and it goes across the country. So it's not something the local conservatives draft themselves or produce. Like really, the question is like, do you want to use this national material or not? And some candidates choose to use it and some don't. And you can obviously criticize people for using it if you don't agree with the technique. I mean, I think that the issue is with the bar charts is unless you have a common standard of campaigning across all the political parties, it will happen. Because let's say I'm in a seat, you're in a three-way marginal seat, you're in a Tory Lib Dem Labour seat, and you got already the Lib Dem leaflet saying only the Lib Dems can win in the council, excluding the 6 independents. Then, and your result happens to be Labour was actually second in 2021 after the Tories for the county elections, you're kind of very tempted to do your own bar chart saying actually Labour was second in 2021 results and there are other outcomes possible. And it encourages the bar chart on your side. And then the Greens might come in and say, actually, we performed very well in the general election because we increased our vote share. We might want to say, even if we can't win the seat, there is an appetite for more, like vote with what we believe in, vote with the Greens. And that it encourages everyone to do the same strategy once you start doing that. Because the reality is when I was canvassing the general election and the Lib Dems came fourth in the general after reform, and there was of course a lot of tactical vote, but I was like on doors where people literally like more than one occasion it happened to me, showed me the newspaper thing saying like, oh really, like, but I thought like only the Lib Dems could, defeat the Tories here, pointing at the bar chart. So it does work. And that's what encourages other parties to do the same strategy.
And this is the thing, it's one of the ways you make change is by winning elections, and or if you want to win the election, how do you counter that? That's again, I think the way you improve the quality, how elections are done, isn't in elections. You have to get some agreement outside of that. So the thing on the national parties, for instance, in Canada, you have federal parties and provincial parties. Well, the NDP organises it both, but the sort of, and it is a very different system. The provinces have huge amounts of autonomy in Canada, but you have different, the political parties are different at the provincial and the national level, or the federal level, which does sort of change the dynamics quite a lot, and sort of what you're discussing. But it's that you join a political party because you want to see change, and joining. I know you think you're an independent, Stephen. You're on. You cooperate with a loose group of people fairly often. We don't want to get into a definition of what a political party is, but I am teasing there. You are an independent, Stephen, but getting things done is easier with a group, and to an extent, people want to see things achieved, and parties are a useful heuristic for that. It's the incentive for the party in the short term is always to win the next election, and that's part of the problem, because you want to improve politics generally. And you have individual members where you're delivering, it'll be national, national print or stuff with a national template or so on, and that can be difficult because it's what do you do because you want to support the party? Do you refuse to deliver this leaflet? That sort of thing.
It's just I think we need to put on the pressure from everybody. The most disappointing thing about Lib Dem bar cards is some of my best friends in politics are Lib Dems as well. And I just wouldn't. Not in my name is an important thing. It might not be possible to do it, but people at a local level, if local Lib Dems oppose those bar charts, they wouldn't happen. But then they work as well, and winning the election is the most important thing. Just seen on Anna's leaflet, another little graph, which I really do like, is a little map of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough with a thing saying Paul Bristow lives here, and apparently he lives in St Albans, And some people would say we shouldn't go for that kind of negative policy, but absolutely, I thought Paul Bristow was the biggest champion of Peterborough ever, and he lived in St Albans. I mean, what's all that about? absolutely. I'm absolutely in favour of calling people out who, standing in areas they don't represent. It's fair enough. You can do it. Yeah, you can stand for election somewhere else. You don't have to live in your constituency or your patch. And I don't. Little Paxton and Priory Park live over the border. But I love that graph. That's great. I mean, really,
none of us live in the wards we represent.
Yeah, but we live close to them, yeah. And for me, I stood in Little Paxton Priory Park because I wanted to represent mainly St Neots at District Council rather than at County, where I largely represent rural communities which are in my ward but are very different than where I live. So that was a decision by me.
I mean, I'll just say this because I literally need to go in a meeting in 4 minutes, but I think it's fine as long as you're open about this. What annoys me is people who say well, I grew up in this area, I went to school here and so on, or suddenly appear to be the local candidate when they're not. I was always open, I currently represent Abbey, I was selected for Abbey. I lived close to it at the time, but I haven't lived in Abbey. I believe I can do my job as a county councillor, as I do my other jobs, where I commuted for far longer to do my other jobs than I was commuting now. And similarly with other seats, obviously for the parliamentary, I lived in Huntington, so I live in the constituency. So I think there's an argument to be made that some people, depending on house elections, not everyone can actually stand in the area they actually live in, and it doesn't mean that you can live in the area you represent and not be a good councillor, and the opposite. So
also, I think Ben, a BCJ, who beat you in the campaign. I think he probably didn't live in Huntingtonshire until he was selected, but he does live up here now, doesn't he? He's got a property here as well. So fair dues to him. I mean, if you're going to commit yourself to the area, that's completely fine, and I don't have a problem with that at all. Yeah.
Right. On that note, I do need to go to my meeting, but see you next week.
Yeah. Take care. See you next time.
See you
guys.
I mean, the other thing we had down to talk about was Laragh Homes.
Yes.
And the some rumblings coming there about what went on, and there's something on Cam's News. I'll post the link in the chat, so it'll appear in lots of places. Oh, that's the wrong chat. Auditor's report reveals irregular, unprofessional activities with Laragh Homes loans. Heavily redacted auditor's report into £20 million of loans made by the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority to Laragh Homes has revealed how suspicions of the risk of, quote, irregular, unprofessional activities and working arrangement between developers and the Combined Authority, end quote, were ignored. I have to say that I've apart from reading the article, I don't know much about the background to this. Do you?
Only through conversations with Nick right at the beginning. He's a friend of mine, and so sometimes we went down the pub and just basically interest in local politics and what the Combined Authority looked like before Nick was, or when Nick was elected. Yeah, so Nick's had his problems and he's got his critics. Yeah, but I think one of the things he's definitely achieved is put it on a firmer, democratic and professional basis. He's got some good officers there now and make some good decisions. When he took over, and to be fair to his predecessor James Palmer, James was the first mayor and had to build things from the ground up, I guess. In a similar position to Nick, arrives with not much experience and makes lots of big decisions about property. And there's lots of those things floating around Cambridgeshire. In East Cambs, where James Palmer comes from, if you read John Elworthy on this, there's lots of backgrounds between these kind of loans to development companies, some of which are kind of arm's length companies, some of which are not. Yeah, there's the whole This Land scandal at County Council. If the County Council wasn't abolished, the Conservative third Ubbsreach development company threatens us financially as well. And so these things are really, really difficult. I'm in general not in favour of councils getting involved in commercial schemes. I know it helps bump up or keep the the council tax lower, especially in places like East Cam, which haven't put it up for like a decade, because they do lots of these things. So, but I don't think that the people involved in councils are commercially competent enough to pull these things off, especially when it comes to property development. So I'm aware that there was lots of I'm not going to say dodgy, I don't know enough about it, but lots of complicated dealings, some of which are clearly unraveled.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, of course, is you've got the officers, but then you can have a change of administration. You get a new set of councillors in who can suddenly have to come up to speed very quickly and make decisions on what can be really quite difficult topics that have really big ramifications.
And I'd say so. I'm on the cabinet HDC, and it took. When we first got elected, there was a desire not to rock the boat. We got lots of things to do, and looking at our complicated commercial investment portfolio wasn't one of our first priorities. It brings in lots of income for the council, but having to make this, and it took. I mean, I'm sure Brett, the portfolio holder, was on top of it from the start. I know he was from the start, but for me as a cabinet member, it's only in the last 6 months that I've been properly explained where we're at with it, and I've been able to form a proper opinion. So these things are really complicated, and I don't think that political elections are the best way of choosing business leaders. I also think that the best business leaders probably don't work as civil servants in local councils because they'd make more money doing it elsewhere. And the third really important point in all of this is that there's also no skin in the game when you're backed up by public money. And so if it's your money and your house is on the line, in your business, you will work your cotton socks off to make sure that your business is as successful as it can be. When you've got the taxpayer propping you up, it might happen sometimes, but in general, I don't feel that happens. And at all levels. And so in general, I'm not in favor of these kind of commercial investments unless they're something to do some real social good, and actually, and they would probably argue this is the case here then. So like, if Huntingdonshire District Council wants to invest in anything, I would like them to invest in building more social housing, because that's one of my objectives, and we don't, all of our social housing in Huntingdonshire is owned by places of people, and quite often they're awful, as I said in a meeting this week. So I mean, I'm sure part of the I don't know enough about it, but it would have been justified probably, on building affordable homes, and there was a story early on in Nick's run about some of the affordable homes that have been built and having to be demolished because they weren't up to spec and things. So it's a complicated area, isn't it? And I don't think that we're best qualified, or any council is best qualified to make those decisions.
Yeah, no, it's difficult. I mean, and and the thing is, there's also the potential for it to go really quite wrong as well, in as has done in some places. The other thing is, and this goes back to a point we've made a lot of times, there isn't much public awareness of this or public scrutiny. It's only when something goes spectacularly wrong that it gets picked up.
Yeah, and to go back to James Palmer, I can't remember the exact numbers, but when he was in his election campaign, he said he wanted to run a very lean authority and he wanted to keep the wage bill. I'm going to say it might be wrong. I've got in trouble already for
under £1 million.
£1 million. I'm going to say £1 million, And actually, the combined authority bill now, is massively over that. James Palmer had to take over that because he was being elected into a role that he didn't really understand. Like any of us starting a new job don't understand it. And he was probably trying to do things lean, and like the combined authority now probably does have the kind of some of the commercial expertise required to make those decisions. But we're back when he was doing it and probably had pockets full of cash because, hey, like I'm a new mayor. He probably didn't have that support either. And so, I mean, I think I'm desperate that whoever's elected as mayor picks up James's and Nick's legacy and continues to bind a combined authority, because the new government has decided that mayors are where the kind of core power are going to be in local government. So we need to have a good functioning institution. I think we all want the combined authority to do well, even if some of us probably disagree with it being created in the first place.
No, I mean it's I'm also not. I understand some of the reasoning, but I'm not sure that actually vesting the power in a single person is the best way of doing it. Particularly when, as in the case of Cambridgeshire, you say, "Oh, you have the mayor and so on," but actually the way it's set up, they actually can't do anything independently, basically.
No. So they get all of the accountability and none of the power, which is really
which is and that sort of leads to disaffection. So, yes.
Good.
Well, I'm gonna. What have you got on for the rest of the day? Work, and more work.
Work, and I've got an assets and procurement meeting.
Oh yeah, you said
as well. Like, it's one of those crazy weeks of council meetings, 2 committee meetings. So I've had to take time off work. Parish council meetings every evening, almost, and it's exhausting. So I'm glad it's the weekend, and so I will probably try and, other than doing some emails, I'll take some time away from politics and relax with my wife.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad. We had the annual town meeting in Huntingdon. We had yesterday evening. We had a few people at it.
That's when you hand out the checks. Yeah, that's not a council meeting, is it? It's a meeting for the town. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so no, we have a report from the mayor on what they've been doing. Reports from the committee chairs. We had we started inviting speakers. So we had Stuart Orme, who's the curator of the Cromwell Museum, talking about the plans for the Cromwell Museum, which was super interesting. And we had the High Sheriff of Cambridgeshire talking about his role and what he's been doing as he comes to the end of term. So they're actually really interesting.
Did he bring his sword?
He was in court dress with his sword.
Excellent. That's really good.
I just mentioned that the High Sheriff David Way gave an award to the Huntingdon Town Council staff for all the work they've been doing. It's been a challenging period. It was just really nice to see them recognised for what they do. Really, really good.
Yeah, they don't get enough credit, High Sheriffs, do they? It's a funny role, especially when they turn up in all their frills and carrying their sword. But when I was chair of county council, Jennifer Crompton was the High Sheriff, and she was fantastic, and we had a fabulous time going around the county together, especially during the proclamation of the Queen's death. She had to read those out. It was a big civic occasion in Cambridge and Peterborough. And I think they do a really great job, actually. I love the High Sheriff and the Lord Lieutenant as well, who's the other kind of really important, the most important civic figure.
Oh, Julie Spence.
Yeah. She's fantastic. Those people. And she also has a sword. I think mayors and chairs should get swords as well, so that we fit in, don't you?
Yeah, Julie Spence is I don't know her well, but on the occasions I've spoken to her or interacted with her, she's tremendously impressive. I mean, she was chief constable, wasn't she?
Yeah, she's chief constable of Cambridgeshire, and so I had the pleasure, especially after that proclamation, of being driven between Cambridge and Peterborough in a police Land Rover, travelling. I think it got up to 140 miles an hour with the blues and twos on, which was completely unnecessary, but one of the most fun things. I was sat in the front like a little boy, just almost.
I went to Cambridge for the proclamation from the City Hall in Cambridge, and then to get back to Huntingdon to do the proclamation in Huntingdon, which I did. I got the bus. This is the difference between St Neots and Huntingdon. And Huntingdon politics was
Cambridge. I was the county council.
St Neots, you want to be driven around by the police at 100 miles an hour.
It was one of the most memorable experiences of my entire political career, and she's fantastic as well.
Yeah. Right. Well, we'll wrap up there. See everybody next week. Do take care.
I hope we don't have to listen to Martin's holiday stories. I've been watching them on Facebook all week, and I'm completely jealous, and I don't really want to.
Yeah, it does look like he's had a brilliant time.
Good. All right, bro. See you later.
All right.
Have a nice week, everybody. Bye.
Bye.